Hey everyone, thanks for joining us for today's webinar, Docker and Jenkins as Code. We have a lot to get through today, so I'm just going to very briefly let you know a few things up top. One, we are recording, so if you need to leave early or a colleague was unable to join, you will be able to view this later on. Two, we are going to have time at the end for questions, so as soon as you think of one, even if maybe you think we'll answer it during the course of the presentation, please go right ahead and ask. It's always good to know what people are asking. I've already gotten a few emails with questions, so it's never too early. Just go right ahead as soon as you think of them. And lastly, at the very end, when I close this out, a very short survey will appear just asking what you thought and what you'd like to learn more about in future sessions. Now, I don't want to take up too much more time because, like I said, we have a lot to get through. So I'd like to introduce Mark Waite to get us started. Mark.
Thanks, Max. Yeah, so I'm Mark Waite. I'm here with Oleg Nenashev and Adrian Lecharpentier. Adrian and Oleg are both very patient with my poor pronunciation. Thankfully, the introduction is really simple. All three of us are engineers at CloudBees. We're all three longtime Jenkins contributors, and we're all three part of the platform special interest group, very interested in Docker and how you configure things, how you maintain and keep systems healthy. So today we're going to talk about Docker packaging for Jenkins, configuration as code for Jenkins and Docker. We'll spend some time talking about what's available from CloudBees and what's coming next. You can see the URL to the slides there on the slide deck so that they're available for you. We're delighted to be having this presentation, and we're going to have a lot of fun with it.
Yeah, so if you miss anything, feel free to just return to this link. The slides should be public, and if you have any questions, just follow the guidelines provided by Max.
So why is it that we like containers so much? We like containers because of what they give us in terms of simple configuration management, and not just configuration management.
You can also fast provision containers. So yeah, all of us started using virtual machines maybe 5 years ago, maybe 10 years ago. They were cool. They allowed us to do clean environments, but containers allow doing so, but also to quickly provision the environment. So you don't need to wait for 20 minutes until your instance is up and running. You can do it in seconds. Also, these containers can be easily disposed. So if you don't need anything, you just delete it, you reclaim your resources, so you can use your system more efficiently, which is critical for CI/CD, because once we get to CD, once we want to run hundreds of deployments, hundreds of tests per day, then of course having resources and the provisioning times, they really matter. Last but not least, containers actually allow to do clusters, because if you want to test a complex system, most likely it consists not only from one component, but from many other items. And by using Docker, by using Kubernetes, you can basically build the entire system and test the entire system within your environment. Jenkins actually likes Docker, and there is a lot of things available for Jenkins in Docker, and a lot of things available in Docker for Jenkins. And this is a part of today's talk, so we can briefly talk about things available. So Mark, maybe you would like to talk through it?
Sure. So Jenkins provides a suite of different ways of addressing your needs in Docker. There are multiple Docker pipeline or Docker plugins which will support giving you the functionality you need, either in Docker directly or in Docker hosted inside Kubernetes, all available that can help with your Docker needs combined with Jenkins.
For example, I'm a hardware engineer in the past, and I used a lot of Jenkins features in order to build my CI/CD flows for hardware. And one of the main issues was to use tools because basically there was no plugins and whatever. But now with Docker, with plugins like Docker Pipeline, you can easily integrate them in Jenkins. So for example, here I provision a virtual machine with GCC, with RISC-V. It's just open source hardware architecture. And I use a Docker image, so I don't need to configure agents. I don't need to configure anything on Jenkins system side. I can then build my pipeline, integrate my images, and just get my pipeline running. So it simplifies the configuration a lot and allows to be flexible in the environment, which we didn't have before. Also, Docker evolves and Jenkins evolves, and there is a lot of new features coming. So, for example, recently, just a few months ago, we had a release for Windows Docker agent support, and now you can use Windows agents as well as Linux agents right inside the declarative pipeline and other features. So here you can see that just by declaring a short pipeline script, we actually can provision a Windows agent, and again, it's completely transparent for you. And there is a lot of features coming here and there. So the Docker ecosystem in Jenkins keeps evolving. And if you miss some features, you can just report them, and hopefully they will be addressed by other contributors. So yeah, we keep going forward with these integrations.
Jenkins runs really, really well in Docker. It's a good fit for a Docker use case. It's very, very comfortable there. There are public repositories available that provide the Jenkins Docker image and agents that can run either agents that you initiate yourself, you initiate a connection inbound, the JNLP style, or where we initiate from the master outbound, SSH. In addition, there's the remoting agent now that uses Kafka. So we've got more and more capabilities of agents. Oleg, you want to talk to this one?
Yeah, why not? So yeah, remoting over Apache Kafka is just one of the features which actually shows the power of containers. It's a result of Google Summer of Code projects in 2018 and then 2019, where we focused on building a new communication layer. So many of us use Jenkins remoting. You may have heard about JNLP agents, Java Web Start agents. Basically, they connect to Jenkins master over TCP. Which is not exactly cloud native. There are other technologies and tools. And what we did, we created new plugin which allowed to do remote communication over Apache Kafka. So now there are Docker images available for these kinds of agents. You can provision them using Docker plugin. And the result of this year was that we went even further to the system level. So now there is Helm chart and masters. So you can use Kafka as a communication layer with end-to-end encryption if you want, with all fault tolerance, with failover, just by using existing plugin. So it was one of the recent features. It runs well in the containers, and it was a foundation step for Jenkins architecture, because now there is implementation by JCasC for WebSockets, which is basically based on the same architecture. So there will be more features coming soon.
In addition, Jenkins provides master images of many different flavors, depending on what your needs are. For example, if you want the absolutely cutting edge, get the weekly release. If you prefer something that's more stable, go with the long-term support release. Maybe you've decided you need OpenJDK 11. Well, we've got that, or 8. I'm a Debian user, a CentOS user. Oh no, I prefer the lightweight forms like Alpine and Debian Slim. All available, maintained, actively updated. Every time we get a new release, these are all issued.
Yeah, and if you want to be on the cutting edge, and not just weekly release, actually we have continuous delivery flows for Jenkins master branches and for some pull requests. So you can just pick up changes before they get released in Jenkins weeklies. And there is a lot of experimental work happening now under the hood of platform special interest group. So you can see that there are images being developed for embedded platforms, for IBM, for ARM, for PowerPC, and there is a lot of things we want to support in the future. We'll spend some time in the end of the talk to provide more details about that.
Running a Docker image is really easy. Just give the command Docker run, tell it the port numbers you want to use. So 8080 for the HTTP port, 50,000 is typically used for the agents, a home volume to mount, and the image to use. Works great.
Yeah, you can see the recording on the right, and you can see that basically you get the same experience as you would get by running Jenkins in command line. Also, it asks you to provide password, etc. And yeah, this is one of the issues why this is not enough. Because yeah, you just run an image, but you don't get plugins there, you don't get configurations there, you don't get jobs, and basically the image isn't ready to go. Yeah, you can use it as a classic Jenkins, but if you talk about configuration management, it's definitely not enough. You would still need to use this web UI. Once the image starts, you would need to configure a lot of things. And if we talk about Docker images, if you want to really provide reproducibility for Jenkins builds, obviously we need another way. There is configuration as code approach, and this configuration as code approach basically it applies to many areas, not just to Jenkins. We want to have something like that for Jenkins, so you don't need to configure anything, everything on your own, and you can use existing tools. In Jenkins, configuration as code basically breaks down to two parts. One is jobs, and for jobs we have pipeline as code, so you can store your Jenkins files in source control. But for system configurations, historically, we didn't have officially support solutions. Yeah, there is a lot of configuration management tools. If you use Ansible, if you use Salt or whatever, you can use existing tools for that, but they were not maintained by Jenkins community. And for example, when we were working on Jenkins 2.0, there were a lot of regressions because we introduced security by default. And there was a long-standing question how to actually do system management in a way which would be supported by Jenkins. One of the answers to that is Docker, because in Docker, obviously, you can take the image and extend it. So what's Jenkins' approach about Docker images? If you want to build custom configuration, if you want to build your system, you take our image and you extend it. So you can include your functionality, your configurations right inside this image. Basically, what do we need? First thing, we need tools. So for example, if you use Git, if you use Mercurial, or if you use other tools on the master, you need to include them. You need to configure your environment. It includes system properties for managing Jenkins. It includes packages which would need to be installed. So you would need to deploy them. And of course, plugins. Jenkins itself, without plugins, it basically does not that many things. So yeah, if you want a Chrome with web interface, you can go and get running. But for plugins, yeah, for any complex functionality, you would need to install plugins, and then you would need to configure the system. So what it means, you need to configure security, you need to configure tools, you need to configure whatever thing you have in Jenkins, like pipeline libraries. Let's go through these configuration bits. For Jenkins, the main configuration bit is extending the Docker image. So if you use Jenkins and Docker, probably you have seen configuration like that. Basically, you create your own Docker file, which extends Jenkins official image. So you can see that from Jenkins on the top, you can see that I use a pretty old version on this slide, but it doesn't matter. And what you can see here, we use apt in order to install some system packages like Git or CURL. We can set up Java options in order to skip setup wizard, because yeah, obviously we don't want to have setup wizard and configuration as code. And then we have some additional volumes being defined, which will later consumed. So if you start using Docker, it's probably one of the first steps you're going to achieve. Then you need to do plugin management. For plugin management, we have a tool called install plugins sh. Actually, it's a script which allows to specify a list of plugins you would like to install, and then this tool will do it for you. So you can have a format like that, where you can say that you want particular versions like Blue Ocean here. You can require latest version, and you can require versions, for example, from experimental update centers. So here I use a Git client as an example. Because Git client was in experimental for something like 2 years. Maybe Mark could comment on that.
Yes, shame, shame, shame. It was an 18-month beta program, but it's released now, Oleg. It's released now.
Yeah, right. So again, this slide is a bit obsolete, but yeah, if you have want to test a beta version of a plugin, for example, now I'm working on a beta version of promoted builds plugin, etc., you can use experimental updates. And moreover, there is a new feature available in Jenkins, incrementals. So it's an engine which basically implements continuous delivery for Jenkins. And here you can use a version from a pull request or from any branch if a plugin is integrated with incrementals. So for example, you have a plugin, you want to apply a quick fix submitted by somebody, but you do not want to wait for release. Then you can just do such definition. It may be a bit long, but it does the job. And you get the experimental plugin installed. Unfortunately, this is not a silver bullet. Firstly, latest versions. So if you define latest versions in Docker images, probably it's not the best idea, because instead of having stable configuration and predictable configuration, actually you have brittle configuration. So every time you rebuild your image, something may go wrong. And in the case of our plugin management script, it doesn't really support transient dependencies. So if two of your plugins depend on another plugin, let's say on Git client or JCasC API or whatever other plugin, latest version may be installed by Jenkins if you don't explicitly define it. And unfortunately, there was no way in the script to prevent that. And there is also no way to check for updates. So it's hard to manage this script. At the same time, it's using internal format, which is not supported by existing tools. So if you want to connect dependabot, it's not possible. If you're a YAML fan, if you want to configure the entire system as YAML, for example, for Kubernetes in Helm charts, you cannot do it as well. This script had a lot of limitations. And this year, actually, we introduced a new tool in the community, which is called Plugin Installation Manager tool. Again, it's a result of Google Summer of Code this year. And this tool, it runs everywhere where you can run Java. So it's not about Docker. You can run it elsewhere. You can run it in Windows images, which we are going to deliver soon. And there you can choose to define a list of your plugins, and there is a lot of features included. So for example, you can, I don't have screenshots here, but yeah, you can just list available updates. You can ask Jenkins to provide a list of incoming security issues. So without starting Jenkins, you can also manage transient dependencies in a more intelligent ways. And these tools keep evolving. Hopefully, we will have it as a part of official images soon. So plugin management, I think, will be resolved. But another issue which you still have is configuration management. So yeah, if you ever used Jenkins, you probably hit issues with configurations. And there are ways to handle it in Docker images. One of the ways is to use XMLs, just to put XMLs and copy them to the Jenkins home directory. If you use this approach, probably it's not the best thing to do in 2019. But there are still things which you can use. For example, Groovy hooks. Groovy hooks is an engine in Jenkins which allows to integrate custom Groovy logic in the Jenkins startup view. You can alter any aspect of Jenkins. You can access runtime, so you can use direct API access to configure your system to modify that. And if you use this engine, you basically just need to put Groovy hooks in the right location. So you can put them in a Word file. You can put them just in the Jenkins home directory, like hook groovyd. So usually it's init.groovy. And after that, the scripts will be executed in alphabetical order, and you can apply the changes. I will show some examples later. One thing about Groovy hook engines is that this engine is not really well documented. So we have two slides here, and basically these two slides is all we have about Groovy hooks in Jenkins Wiki at the moment. So obviously documentation is a part we could improve, and there is a lot of discoveries by Jenkins users when they start using this engine. Let's speak a bit about how it works. Basically, Jenkins has a quite simple startup flow. We first load plugins, we augment extensions, then we load jobs, and then there is post handling where Groovy hooks run. So what you can see here, that the Groovy hooks actually get executed after jobs. So if you need to migrate your jobs, if you need to configure your system, it's totally doable from the Groovy hooks side, whether you need it or not. Here's an example of such Groovy hooks. I've presented this example a few times before, and yeah, we'll show the demo later. So here you can see that we configure our remoting. For example, we need to disable CLI. In a recent version of Jenkins LTS, you don't longer need that because we removed remoting CLI by default. But you still need to configure protocols you want to use. You still need to disable agent to master security to prevent malicious calls by agents. And you also need to configure some security. So you might have seen that I disabled Jenkins Start Wizard in the flags, and actually it means that you're responsible to configure the entire system, including security. It's one of the issues in Jenkins. If this code looks complex to you, actually it is, because yeah, you need to know Java API, you need to know what exactly methods to call, you need to somehow debug that. It's possible, but it needs a lot of experience if you want to do that. And this is not an approach we would like to have going forward, but it was a way to configure Jenkins system for the last, let's say, 8 years. So when I started doing Jenkins configuration as code in 2011, I actually used Groovy hooks from the very beginning. If you want to use Groovy hooks in Docker, it's really easy. You just need to copy your scripts to the right location, and after that, everything works. So I have a demo for that. So maybe we could just take a quick look before we go forward. So Mark, would you like to add something?
Yeah, so for me, Groovy is the ultimate power tool. It really gives me all sorts of capability. I can write code at all sorts of levels, but it also has all the risks associated with being the ultimate power tool, right? I think, Adrian, you may have seen similar things, that there are risks associated with Groovy because I've got the entire world ready to me and I can write all sorts of code.
Yeah, exactly. You can have basically you have access to all the instance background, so security and so on. So that's very powerful, but you can also disable security without noticing it, and it doesn't need your instance to restart to take effect. So
in some sense, it's even more dangerous than plugins, because plugins are limited by Java APIs, but Groovy allows to ignore Java APIs, basically built-in reflection engine. So yeah, this is my demo which I'm going to show. You can see that there is a configuration file. It's a bit longer because this demo was created for pipeline development without committing code. So basically this demo allows to develop pipeline libraries or Jenkins files and to test them without committing, without pushing the code, and without downloading it. And here I have some configurations, basically installing plugins, etc. The most of the configuration is being done by Groovy hooks. I have a lot of them. So for example, I presented security configuration. Here's this configuration on this instance. I also use authorized project plugin, so there is some QA authentificators for that. And actually Groovy hooks allow you to do a lot of things. So for example, there is development folder. As I said, this demo is for developing pipelines, and here I do some checks. So for example, if I pass a library, so if I define a volume, I create an additional folder with demos for testing purposes, and if not, I just skip this step. So I use Groovy in order to customize my logic and to define how the configuration loads. And here, for example, I can add pipeline library. So what do I do here? I create a folder which uses this library. Then I add additional libraries from volume if I need. I add some sample projects, again, which are being loaded from my demo repository. And after that, I create additional jobs. And everything is done in Groovy. You can see that I invoke methods. So I use libraries inside Groovy in order to simplify the things. And you can do a lot of there. And actually, you can debug all these scripts by just connecting debuggers to your Jenkins instance. For practical examples, yeah, we're talking about Docker and JCasC code, and obviously I configure Docker agents using Groovy hooks here, and the configuration looks like that. So here you can see that I use yet another Docker plugin, but if you use Docker plugin, the configuration is almost the same. And after that, here you can see that there is install Docker Cloud for agents, and here you can see that there is a quite long configuration here. But actually, if you configure it in UI, it's even longer. But what I can do, I can apply some tweaks. For example, here I actually define 2 Docker templates, and I just extend one template by adding additional configuration. So this template is for Maven builds. I use this code. Yeah, it looks like declarative almost, but actually it's a pure Groovy code using pure Jenkins APIs without additional tweaks. And there I extended this configuration by adding additional labels, by adding volumes I want to use, by adding additional properties which are needed for tools, and then everything works. Okay, I just added these images. So Groovy is pretty powerful. You can see that this script is tremendously complicated. In IDE, it looks a bit better, but still it's hard to develop. If you want to know how to develop these scripts, I have presentations for that. I can provide some links during Q&A. But let's just see how it works in general. So I have an image ready to go. Let's see, Docker PS. So yeah, I'm just going to run this image.
So Oleg, for me, as I watch and look at that code, I think, wow, there is a lot of power hiding there in that code, but it is ultimately you're showing real code. It's all the strengths and all the challenges that go with conditionals and with all of the logic associated with a full programming environment.
Exactly. So if you're a software developer, you can develop your system with that. If you're not a software developer, we have another solution for you about which we will talk just in a few minutes. Okay, so here we have a system starting, so we can see familiar messages like, for example, listed all plugins here. So it's just loading the system configuration and processes extensions. Yeah, it reports an error because I use old version of Maven. I don't really use Maven integration plugin, so this message is not going to stop me. But yeah, definitely I would need to update something in the demo at some point. Okay, and here we started all the plugins, and after that we will start applying configuration as code. You can see that it loads code from Groovy, and we should get some messages from the system soon. So yeah, you can see that now the instance is being configured. We get some login messages, which are already printed by Groovy. We execute scripts, and once the instance finishes, we should be able to access it. Okay. Yeah, usually it takes less time.
So you've done full configuration here, all of the parts and pieces, and you did say you'd conditionally create folders based on context that you find.
Exactly. Not only context, but also environment variables. So for example, if you see in the Docker file, there is some environment variables, there are some arguments, for example, create admin, because on my production instances, I don't want to have admin users. I want to have everything to be immutable. And I just set create admin to false because I use full configuration as code. I use external login. But here I create admin just for demo purposes. So yeah, this flexibility we can use by applying Groovy and other magic. You can produce multiple images, development, production using it. It's probably not the way I would recommend, but you definitely could do that. Okay. So yeah, I'm running on Windows with Docker for Windows, with antivirus, with screen share enabled. On my personal laptop, this startup just takes 15 seconds. But yeah, here we can try going to the Jenkins web interface. Nothing good is going to happen because it's still loading. But yeah, let's see. Actually, we got something running. So It still initializes, but we can get our system running at least some bits. So here, for example, I can log in as admin. I believe that it's just logging a subsystem which didn't work well because the instance is up and running. So probably, yeah, I just clicked enter and all the logs got synchronized. So, okay, now I log in as admin. Okay, so finally we've got the system. So here you can see that I have some items pre-configured. I have folders created. So for example, I have folder for development. At the moment it's empty because I didn't pass pipeline library in my startup command. But yeah, there are other folders like system production, which contain some jobs. All these jobs have been created by Groovy hooks. And we also have a system configuration, which includes security. I'm using role strategy plugin in this demo. Okay, you can see that probably this demo needs to be updated, but again, it's pretty straightforward to do so. So here you can see some configurations which have been passed by my hooks, and if you go to system configuration, you can also see a lot of things here. So let's click configure system.
So, and these configuration settings were passed in strictly through the Groovy calls that you were making inside those various scripts.
Exactly. So this demo is almost fully configured by Groovy, and yeah, it takes a bit long, but it has nothing to do with Groovy. So I keep my fingers crossed that we see that. Okay. Okay, here we are. So yeah, it's still loading, but you can see that there is a lot of configurations being set by the system, and here are our clouds. So yeah, we use yet another Docker plugin. And if you thought that this code is long, just a second, I believe I closed that. Yeah, so if you still think that this code is too long, then you can just see the configuration. So it's here, and here we have this configuration. Moreover, there are some experimental options, settings, etc., which are collapsed, but which actually include some configurations in my settings. So by using Groovy, we just speed up this configuration, and you get everything running. But yeah, as we discussed multiple times, this configuration is quite complicated. It's hard to manage that. So what if we had another approach to configure the system? If you want to know more about Groovy hooks, yeah, we have some demos. You can find more demos on the internet. But yeah, let's talk about something new because yeah, it's 2019. I believe everyone on the call has already heard about Jenkins configuration as code plugin. It's a new plugin which was introduced for various purposes, mostly configuration management for Jenkins. The first release happened in September 2018, so more than 1 year ago. Now it's version 1.34. And the plugin keeps evolving, it keeps integrating new features. And the main purpose of this plugin is to do configuration using YAML. So the idea is simple, and there was a lot of presentation about JCasC plugin. So we want to deep dive into JCasC. So you pass a YAML file, then this YAML file gets converted, and basically you get your configuration applied. Yeah, that's simple. That's what you can do in Groovy hooks. But there is a lot of things you cannot do in Groovy hooks. For example, you cannot export configuration to Groovy. Each time you want to configure everything, you do it on your own. But here you can actually export configuration from a running Jenkins instance and get the configuration file. Then there is CLI, there is REST API, which you can use for configuration management and for verification of your configurations. So you can really build your configuration management tooling around JCasC. And there is a lot of plugins which are currently supported out of the box. So you can use YAML file to configure hundreds of plugins, and compatibility is one of the main features of JCasC. If you're aware about credentials, if you're aware about other sensitive things, you don't need to worry because Jenkins have external credential sources, whether it's Kubernetes credentials provider or CyberArk provider, which is offered by Cloudbeats. You can use these external credentials and integrate them with Jenkins configuration as code. And you can also do job and folder management, because there are tools like job DSL plugin, which can integrate with JCasC plugin as well. So JCasC is a complex thing, but thanks to Docker, you don't need to be an expert in order to integrate it. Basically, what you need to do, you need to put one YAML file in a proper location and just install the plugin. Again, I have it in my demo, but yeah, what you need to know about it is that configuration as code plugin is not a part of Jenkins code. It's a standalone plugin, so you have to use plugins TXT script or installation manager or plugin installation manager tool to configure it. But after that, you can get it running in your system. And it actually does a lot of things, and you can combine it with Groovy hooks. So my personal recommendation is to use Jenkins configuration as code where possible. And when it's not possible, you could consider using Groovy hooks, because there is you can determine order of execution. Groovy hooks always run after Jenkins configuration as code, and you can configure your system. So for example, if there is a missing plugin, if there is missing integration, or if you want to do crazy dynamic scripting like I did in my demo, then you can use Groovy hooks for that. But JCasC can do the majority of configuration. Regarding features, yeah, basically Groovy hooks is a Swiss knife for Jenkins. You can do everything there, but it's extremely complicated and extremely difficult to manage system with it. And JCasC is a user-friendly feature. So that's why when Mark was talking about complexity, my recommendation is to go to JCasC plugin where you can. And it's really simple. So I can probably just show quick demo here for again for the same repository. So here you can see that there is file Jenkins YAML. So in this demo, it's a bit small, so just 100 lines. We have a bigger example for you. We will get to it later. And here you can see that my system is partially configured. For example, I configured security using JCasC. You can export this configuration, and the export configuration will work in many cases. So many features are already available. Okay. So that's what I have about JCasC. And yeah, in my case, I was a maintainer of Jenkins configuration as code. I was with the plugin from very beginning. So I know a lot of internals. I also spent a lot of time fixing my issues. But maybe you would like to hear a story from somebody who just started, or maybe not just started, but who could share a real experience and hands-on experience with that. So Mark, would you like to do that?
Sure. Yeah. So I had a very specific problem. I maintain the Git plugin, and as part of that, I'd like to be sure that I don't break the users. There are over 250,000 installations of many of these very high visibility plugins like the Git plugin. I love automated tests, but unfortunately, most of the bugs that were being reported were not detected by the automated tests. And Git plugin users really don't like being broken by plugin upgrades. So two choices. I could either automate everything and never release until it's all automated, or admit that I still need to do interactive testing. I decided interactive testing, but interactive testing for the Git plugin and for many others is complicated because we're multi-platform with multiple Git versions, multiple different variations that make things complicated and challenging. So my simple answer was, I'm going to set up my tests to run from a repository. I'm going to run configurations tracked of Jenkins. So next,
sorry,
what this does is what I did was create a repository that records the long-term support version, and another branch of it that does long-term support plus plugins, another branch that adds credentials, and another one that adds agents. With that set, I now have a very simple command to do Docker build and then Docker run. And I get out of it a significant and interesting set of configurations that I can stand up and tear down very rapidly anywhere. So in my example, I've got 30 agents that I use, FreeBSD, various Linux variants, multiple Windows machines, my Raspberry Pi, cloud agents, local agents, over 1,000 jobs that I use to test, some specific bug checks, and it's simple and easy to start anywhere in my network. I like this technique because it let me get benefit immediately, and it let me use systems to do my work and be sure that I ship good code.
Yeah, would you like to show this demo, or should we keep it at the end?
Given the time that we've got, I think let's skip the demo and let's just go forward.
Okay, so we'll have some time on the end. So let's talk a bit about CloudBees and CloudBees components like CloudBees Jenkins Distribution, which also offer some configuration as code capabilities. Again?
Yeah, so in CloudBees, we have a set of products and services to help your pipelines, your continuous integration and continuous delivery processes to reach out to put your products and what you and your projects to your users as soon as possible. So for that, we have multiple products that you can see here, and we will be speaking more precisely about 2 of them and services. So we have all our products are available as Docker images that you can find on Docker Hub. If you have Kubernetes environment or you want to go there, we have Helm charts also to be able to use CloudBees Jenkins distribution. The CloudBees distribution, CloudBees Jenkins distribution and CloudBees core also can be run on premises and in the cloud using different deliveries. So in Docker, Kubernetes, virtual machine, or bare metal. About the plugins, we have a functionality that we will be speaking a bit later. But here you need to know that all the plugins are available to customers, all the Docker plugins, sorry, and we put some SLAs on them on several plugins. And on different levels of support. About JCasC, about configuration as code, the plugin itself is a tier 2, so what we call compatible plugin. So it means that we have a certain SLA on bug fixes and security issues. It's part of CloudBees Jenkins support and CloudBees Jenkins distribution as we speak. We also have a technical preview on CloudBees core to be able to configure standalone masters and manage masters. Sorry for that. It's called CloudBees bundle feature. It will we will have an engineering blog on the engineering blog itself in a few days. To explain all the insights, how to use them, and how you can benefit from those features in a few days. Yeah.
In our case, we mostly speak about CloudBees Jenkins distribution, which is the product which is almost 98% close to Jenkins, which is based on open source and which focus things like setup, stability, and it also offers some additional features. So we could probably speak about them and see how JCasC and these features work together.
Yeah, sure. So the CloudBees Jenkins distribution is, as you said, mostly open source. We just added a few features on it that can benefit your lifecycle with Jenkins. So it's based on the Jenkins LTS. So for every for any LTS, you have a Jenkins CloudBees Jenkins distribution. We have a set of plugins that we do verify their behavior with the instance with CloudBees Jenkins distribution. It's called CloudBees Assurance plugin. the set is a bit more than that. But the plugin that will help you with that is CloudBees Assurance plugin. It's provides you a way to make sure that you install plugin and we verified it before so that it won't break your instance if you install a new plugin or if you install an upgrade.
I like this story here specifically for my benefit because customers who were using CloudBees Assurance program were not affected by some mistaken releases I did some months ago of a certain very high visibility plugin. So Adrian, I like what this does because it insulates people. It lets them get benefits from stability, from capabilities that we've tested.
Yes, exactly. So you are sure that your instance is always up and running, and that you, if ever you face a problem, then you can give us a feedback and we can work on fixing them and provide the fix as soon as possible as well. There's also the recently new plugin and service that is called Jenkins Health Advisor by CloudBees, which is basically an override on a different layer of CloudBees Jenkins support plugins and core plugins, where those two plugins take a snapshot of your instance with the logs, plugins installed, various installations, and these Jenkins Health Advisor by CloudBees allow you to send CloudBees those support bundles and analyze them for you and give you the feedback to know that maybe you have a plugin upgrade to do to not face a certain issue. That is very powerful because it's based on years and years of support services done by CloudBees on various customers to identify known bugs, known issues, and provide you recommendation on configuration, plugins not to use or plugins to upgrades to be able to have your instance at its best of capabilities. So it's really trying to show you potential issues before you hit them so that you have a limited downtime, if any.
Let's go back to JCasC then.
Yeah, so as I said earlier, JCasC is a compatible to plugin. It combined with the CloudBees Assurance program to make sure that you install plugins that we verified, and mostly versions that we did verify, to make sure that the instance that you want to start with JCasC will be effectively up and running as you want. So we have here 2 links about the demo and the documentation that you can find to use JCasC in CloudBees Jenkins distribution.
Yeah, we could probably briefly show how it looks like.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, so I have a link for that. So if you've seen a previous demo, it looks like the same. So the main difference between CloudBees Jenkins distribution and Jenkins is that CloudBees Assurance program manages plugins for us. So here, if you go to Docker file, you can see that we still have plugins.txt in order to install plugins. But this configuration is relatively simple because we install only the plugins which need additional patches for JCasC. So what we've been working on together with Adrian over past months is to ensure that there is better support for JCasC and plugins, and there were a lot of features delivered. For example, for Git, for EC2, for Jira, you can see some plugins there. And not all these patches have been integrated in the version of this demo. But if we speak about the current version of CloudBees Jenkins distribution, or one which was shipped just today, or one which we had 1 month ago, then the most of these versions have been already integrated. And here, what we have in the previous demo, I had just 100 lines of YAML files, but here we have something like 500, I guess. And you can see that there is a lot of configurations there. And one thing is that all this configuration has been actually exported from Jenkins using JCasC features, and you can basically do the same. And here we configure almost all Tier 1 and Tier 2 plugins and cloud-based Jenkins distribution, which actually have a global configuration. And you can see that these configurations are mostly exported. There is still some integration issues. That's why it's Tier 2 plugin, not Tier 1. So, for example, here you can see that there is branch discovery traits, which are not configurable in JCasC at the moment. But the most of configuration is actually operational, and you can use it now. So hundreds of plugins support Jenkins configuration as code at the moment, and it's definitely a time to try it out, because there is a lot of features available and many things will work out of the box.
That configuration export capability is just delightful. It made my life much better in my use. It's really amazing how well it does.
Exactly. Yeah, it was one of the work over the summer to make it more straightforward. And now there is also work being done in the project in order to allow managing configurations and verifying configuration YAMLs. So there is a new plugin for Visual Studio Code created, which you can try if you're a JCasC user. But yeah, still in cloud-based Jenkins distribution, there are some features which are coming soon. For example, for plugin management, so installed plugins SSH equivalent is going to be available in one of the next releases. Same, you will be able to extend the images, and there is documentation staged. So we are waiting for that to become available. So if you take a look at this demo, you can see that. Yeah, so here you can see that there is pull request from Adrian, which actually uses management scripts directly from cloud-based Jenkins distribution. Here in this demo, which you can try out if you want, we use scripts from Jenkins LTS. So in the next release, the most of this code will be gone because they will be built-in management in cloud-based Jenkins distribution.
Yeah, and the Docker file will be way shorter in the future as well.
Just a few lines. Okay, so let's return back to Jenkins and Docker. And actually, there is a lot of things happening here. So maybe you, Mark, would like to talk about it?
Sure, we've got more things coming in configuration as code. A continuing focus on plugin compatibility and adding new capabilities to configuration as code. There's also pending changes to allow us to have a read-only configuration UI so that we can present to the users what the configuration is and not have them changing it because it's now managed as code. We've also got discussions going on in the developers mailing list on initialization milestones and how to best improve that. And we've got this Visual Studio Code plugin that just came in from Google Summer as Code.
It's not Google Summer of Code, it's another program, Community Bridge.
Oh, you're right, my mistake.
Yeah, thanks to Jenkins sponsors, we were able to run our own program, and we will keep it evolving it in the next years.
Now we've got new master images that were proposed, and we have pull requests for, including proposals to do a Windows-based master image, Ubuntu, Red Hat's UBI, adopt OpenJDK with both Hotspot and the OpenJ9 execution engine, multi-platform Docker for those who want to run on Series 390 or PowerPC or ARM, and new agent images.
Yeah. So if you use Jenkins now, if you consider using it, think about moving to Docker. We started using Docker in 2016 and South this, and right now almost all our ecosystem is inside Docker or Kubernetes, and actually it works pretty well. Same in Jenkins community, our CI Jenkins IO instance also runs in Docker and Kubernetes at the moment, and we keep extending features. So if you want to do so, you will need to take official images and you will need to extend them. There are demos available, like the demo we presented today, demo Jenkins config as code. So if you want to have some examples, you can just go here, try it out, and I'll make sure that I will update the demo soon. So it will be based on recent Jenkins LTS versions. And if you go this towards this approach, use configuration as code. So whether it's Groovy hooks or whether it's Jenkins YAML from configuration as code, use such static configurations. And of course, if you go towards this setup, pin all versions. So never use latest. It's one of the best practices for Docker and for configuration management in Jenkins. So just do that. And of course, for new setups, please use configuration as code plugin, because it's one of the ways to simplify your management. And the configurations we presented today, they're really simple, and you can get them for your instances. So you can just install a configuration as code plugin, click export button, and get your own configuration file in just a few minutes. And if you do that, please let us know how it went for you and what's your experience. If you're tired of plugin management and issues there, you could consider using cloud-based Jenkins distribution, because it offers all features available in Jenkins for configuration as code, but at the same time, you won't be responsible to manage plugins on your own. And there is a level of compatibility which is guaranteed by cloud-based, and it's totally available for everyone. So you can try it out.
The Jenkins Platform Special Interest Group would love to have you participate. Just to reiterate on Oleg's comments on the takeaways, it really is a great time to start and incrementally configure your system with configuration as code. Between Groovy hooks and the configuration as code plugin, there are lots of ways you can begin. The platform SIG is working hard to make sure that there are lots of interesting and fun ways to keep contributing there. Come join us.
Okay, we have something like 5 minutes left for questions. So I guess Max has a lot of them. And
yeah, we do have plenty of questions to get through.
Okay.
All right, so so just so everyone knows, we're not gonna have time to get through all of them, but we are able to take these offline. So if we don't get to your question, we can reach out later. I will also put my email in the chat if you want to reach out directly. Let's start with this one. Came in nice and early. So, okay, configuration as code is a fantastic step forward for a more DevOps friendly and cloud native Jenkins, and we are currently using it to migrate our Jenkins instances into the cloud. The next step in our cloud journey will be to start shipping build logs off Jenkins and into an external repository. Are you aware of any work being done in this area?
Yeah, so historically there was a project in a Cloud Native Special Interest Group. So if you go to Jenkins site, there are several communities there. One of the communities is Cloud Native SIG, and this SIG was working on multiple projects, including pluggable storage. And in pluggable storage, we actually achieved some bits. So for example, for build logs, you can use plugins. There is, for example, existing plugins for Fluentd, which allows pushing data to Fluentd, or AWS CloudWatch. There are experiments for Elasticsearch and for other components. It's for build logs. For system logs, actually nothing really needs to be done, because you can configure appenders and then push the configurations just to syslog and display them in external system. So that's what we have for logs now. So yeah, there's projects going here and there, but the special interest group is dormant at the moment, but hopefully it will be restored at some point.
All right, great. As another quick reminder to everyone, we are recording and we'll be sharing this after. We're getting a lot of people asking to make sure they can see the slides and recordings later. You will absolutely be able to. Let's take another quick look. Let's see. This came on early on, but is there a GitHub repo with some best practice snippets of using ECR repos, etc., that we can reshare? And such, yes.
Sorry.
I'm not sure I caught the question. So was it ECR registries?
It said ECR repos, etc.
Yeah, so yeah, there is of course Elastic Container Registry, which can stand for ECR. So in such case, I would recommend looking for solutions, because, for example, if you just look at ECR Jenkins, probably you can find a lot of different things. like plugins, etc. But I'm not sure what is exactly level of integration this Jenkins configuration is called. For plugins, yeah, you can just find it here. So yeah, my Amazon ECR plugin, which you can just run and which will be probably able to provision agents inside this registry. And yeah, it's basically the same as Docker. So you can use the same principle as we presented for ECR as well. I'm not sure whether it answers the question because I didn't use ECR on my own in recent times.
All right. If you do want to follow up, I did put my email in the chat.
Yep.
We're just at the top of the hour. I'm hoping maybe we can do one or two more real quick for everyone before that survey comes up and we end this. So we got a lot of different questions about using Groovy with Jenkins. It's hard to kind of consolidate them all into one question, but I think the overarching idea is if someone wants resources on getting into using Groovy with Jenkins, where would you recommend they start?
Google is your friend.
Well, it's one of the answers. Another answer is just take a look at this demo or at other presentations. Because, yeah, for example, if you go to my speaker deck, I will attach the link later, Max. There is a presentation specifically about Groovy hooks and Jenkins. Yeah, so it's somewhere in the bottom, but there is full presentation about using Groovy hooks. And there are some tricks which we didn't discuss today, like debugging, etc. All of it is documented there, and we will provide a link.
All right, maybe we'll do a feature session on it. Who knows? All right, let's do one more. Is there a way to dynamically load external Groovy, execute it, and then unload that code to allow for testing of the code independent of Jenkins?
So if you want to test Groovy hooks, etc., I wouldn't recommend this approach because Groovy hooks operate in a specific environment, and you would rather provision the entire container. So you can build this container, demo Jenkins as code, run it, and in such way you will test it. So you can build a test framework around your images, and it's something you would need to do anyway if you want to continuously deliver your Jenkins images. So it would be my recommendation how to approach that. If you want to just run Groovy hooks, there are other plugins, for example, Scriptler plugin for Jenkins, which can be used to run arbitrary hooks. This plugin was disabled in Jenkins for a couple of years due to security issues, but now it's fully available to Jenkins users again because all the issues have been addressed. So if you want to use the power of Groovy for any kind of management, then it's probably a way to go now.
All right, excellent. We are just over the hour. I do want to be mindful of everyone's time, so we are going to be logging off momentarily. Again, my email is in the chat if you want to reach out directly with questions, but we are collecting these and can reach out offline later on as well. Before we go, Mark, Oleg, Adrian, do any of you have any kind of parting words you'd like to leave us with?
Use configuration as code, use Docker, works great.
Last one.
All right. All right, thank you everybody. And that survey is about to come up and we'll be talking to you again real soon. Thanks.
Thank you all.
Thank you, everybody.
Thanks.